A Search in Secret India by Paul Brunton. Chapter 13. The Garden of the Lord. Out of the scurrying of my feet hither and thither over the face of northern India, two tracks converge upon a unique little-known colony, which is housed in a town that bears the poetical name of Dialbagh, the Garden of the Lord. One of the tracks starts in Lucknow, where I have the good offices of Sunderlal Nigam as a guide, philosopher, and friend during my stay in that picturesque city. We roam the city together and talk philosophy as we roam. He is, I suppose, not more than 21 or 22, but like many of his Indian brothers, he has matured early. We wander through the old Mughal palaces and muse upon the inexorable fate which has overtaken the vanished kings. I fall in love anew with the glorious Indo-Persian architecture, whose graceful curves and delicate colorings reveal the refined taste of its creators. How shall I ever forget these bright days when I idle among the orange trees of the royal pleasure gardens which grace Lucknow? We explore colorful edifices where once the seductive favorites of the old kings of Oudh, O-U-D-H, flaunted their olive-skinned beauty upon marble colonies and in golden baths. Now these places are empty of royal flesh and hold only memories. I return again and again to a beautiful mosque which stands near the quaintly named Monkey Bridge. Its exterior is white throughout and gleams in the sunlight like a fairy palace. The shapely minarets seem to rise in perpetual prayer to bright heaven. Peeping inside, I see a crowd of worshippers prostrating themselves upon the ground and rhythmically invoking Allah. The scene receives accentuated charm from the brightly colored little rugs upon which the devout perform their prostrations. None can doubt the fervor of these followers of the Prophet, for their religion seems a living force to them. Amid all these excursions and peregrinations, I become gradually impressed by certain characteristics belonging to my young guide. His shrewd remarks, his exceptional intellectuality, and his matter-of-fact attitude towards mundane affairs are somehow blent with the depth and mysticism of a student of yoga. It is only after repeated meetings and ardent discussions during which I become aware that he is sounding and probing my own beliefs and ideas, that he reveals himself to be a member of a semi-secret fraternity called the Radha Somas, R-A-D-H-A-S-O-A-M-I-S. I pick up the second track, which leads me to Dialbagh from Malik, M-A-L-L-I-K, another member of the same brotherhood. He comes within my orbit at another place and time. As Indians go, he is a fine, fair-skinned fellow. For centuries, his people have had as neighbors wild frontier tribes who keep covetous eyes on their neighbors' possessions. But the wise British government is taming these restless fire-eaters, not by recourse to the old methods of endless fighting, but by taking them into its service and pay. Malik is superintending some of the fierce tribesmen who have submitted to the more pacific and useful occupations of making roads across hill and desert, constructing bridges and building defense forts and barracks. Many of these wild-looking persons carry their rifles, more perhaps from an old habit than from present need. They are at work all along the stretch of the northwest frontier, making new routes for the traders and new defenses for soldiers. Malik works hard and well near Dera Ismail Khan, Derismailkhan, that frontier outpost of empire. His character harmoniously couples a sturdy self-reliance and intense practicality with nobility of character and profound thought. I'm impressed by the careful balance of his qualities. After a strong initial reticence, which is in accord with all the ancient traditions of yoga, he reluctantly yields to my inquiries and admits that he has a master whom he visits periodically, whenever his service leaves permit him to do so. His master, whose name is Sahabji Maharaj, is the head of the Radha Somas. And I heard for the second time that his master has conceived the astonishing and interesting notion of combining a yoga discipline with a daily life based on Western ways and ideas. A Search in Secret India by Paul Brunton, Chapter 13. The friendly efforts of these two men, Nigam and Malik, bear fruit at last. I am to be the guest of His Holiness, Sahabji Maharaj, who is the uncrowned king of the Radha Somas' own town of Dalibag. I motor the few dusty miles of road from Agra to the colony. Dalibag, the garden of the Lord. If my early impression is correct, the founder is striving to keep the town true to its beautiful name. I am taken to a building which houses the master's private office. The waiting room is furnished in an attractive European style. From my restful easy chair I can appreciate the nicely painted walls and the refined simplicity of the furniture. Here is westernization with a vengeance. I have encountered yogis in bare, drab bungalows, in lonely mountain caves, in gloomy thatched huts on riverbanks, but never have I expected to find one of the tribe housed in such a modern environment. What manner of man is this leader of this unusual fraternity, I wonder? I am not left long in doubt, for the door slowly opens and he himself walks in. His figure is of medium height. His head is wrapped in a spotless white turban. His features are refined, though not typically Indian. With a slightly paler skin, he might have passed for a quiet American. A pair of large spectacles cover his eyes, and a short mustache adorns his upper lip. He wears the high-necked, many-buttoned long coat, which is the Indian tailor's adaptation of our Western style. His bearing as he approaches is modest and gentle. He welcomes me with courtly dignity. Our greetings over, I wait till he has settled down in his chair, and then venture to compliment him on the artistic decorations of the room. A row of brilliant teeth gleams across his mouth as he smiles his reply. God is not only love, but beauty. As man begins to express the spirit within him, he should express more beauty, not only in self, but in surroundings and environments. His English is noticeably well spoken. The voice is quick and confident. There is a little period of silence, and then he speaks again. But there is another decoration upon a room's walls and furnishing, which is invisible, yet it's very important. Do you know that these things carry the influence of people's thoughts and feelings? Every room, every chair gives the unseen influence of the person who has constantly used it. You may not see this atmosphere, but it is nevertheless there, and all who enter within its range are unconsciously affected by it to varying degrees. Do you mean that there is an electrical or magnetic radiation around objects which reflect human characters? Quite so. Thoughts are real on their own plane, and they attach themselves for shorter or longer periods to whatever we consistently use. That's an interesting theory. It is more than a theory, it is a fact. Man possesses a subtler body than the physical, and in this subtle body there exist centers of activity which correspond to the physical organs of sense activity. Though these centers can discern invisible forces, for when they are energized, they bestow psychic and spiritual sight. A brief pause follows, and then he asks my impressions of India's condition. I frankly criticize his country's neglect of modern ways of living, its slowness in picking up those pleasant comforts, handy conveniences, and mechanical inventions which improve man's brief sojourn in this world. Its inattention to the demands of sensible hygiene and proper sanitation, and its excessive devotion to stupid social customs and cruel practices, which are supposedly based on religious practices. I tell him freely that priestly preoccupations seem to have kept India's energies in the cul-de-sac with deplorable results. I instance some of the irrational things which have been done in the name of religion, but which merely succeed in proving how men can neglect or misuse the gift of intelligence which their God has bestowed upon them. My outspoken observations draw a definite assent from the lips of Sri Maharaj. You have hit on the very points which form part of my program of reform, he remarks, gazing at me reminiscently. On the whole, it seems that many Indians expect God to do for them what they are perfectly capable of doing for themselves. Exactly. We Hindus talk glibly of religion in order to cover up a lot of things which have nothing to do with religion. The trouble is that for the first 50 years or so, a religion is pure and vital. Later, it degenerates into mere philosophy. Its followers become talkers, not religiously living people. Finally, it descends for its last and longest phase into the arms of hypocritical priests. In the end, hypocrisy becomes accepted as religion. I gasp at such a straightforward admission. What's the use of wrangling about heaven and hell, about God and so forth? Humanity finds itself on a physical plane, and it ought not to neglect the matters which pertain to this plane. Let us try to make our life here more beautiful and happier, he concludes. That is why I have sought you out. Your disciples seem such fine men, straining to be as practical and up-to-date as any European, making no parade of religion but living good lives, and withal they keep to their yoga practices with faithful regularity. Sahibji smiles in acknowledgement. I am glad you observed that, he replies quickly. By setting up these activities, I am attempting to show the world the same thing, that a man can be perfectly spiritual without running away to caves, and that he can reach the highest attainments in yoga while carrying on with worldly avocations. If you succeed in that effort, the world may think a lot more of Indian teachings than it does now. We are going to succeed, comes the confident answer. Let me tell you a story. When I first came here to begin the colony, one of my chief desires was to have plenty of trees about the place, but outsiders told me that it was impossible to grow trees in this barren sandy soil. The Yumna, Jumna, is not far off, and this is one of its old tracts, an ancient riverbed, in short. There were no experts among us, and we had to learn by frequent experiment and constant failure which kind of tree could live in such unpromising soil. Almost all the trees planted during the first year, and there were over 1,000 of them, died off. However, one tree survived. We noted it, and we kept up our endeavors. Now there are 9,000 healthy trees growing in Dialbag. I tell you this because it is symbolical of the attitude with which we are facing our problems. We found barren ground here. It seems so worthless that no one else would buy it. Look how it has been transformed. Then it is your aim to build an Arcadia near Agra? He laughs. I tell him of my desire to see the town. Certainly I shall arrange it for you at once. We will see Dagalba first, and then we will talk about its why and wherefore, and you will understand my ideas better when you see them in practice. He rings a businesslike bell. A few minutes later, I'm walking on a tour of inspection along half-finished streets and among bright-looking factory buildings. My guide is Captain Sharma, who was formerly in the Indian Army Medical Service, but who is now devoting all his services to the constructive effort which is being made here by his master. A quick reading of his character conveys the impression of another successful combination of Western striving with sincere spirituality. A luxuriant avenue provides the entrance to the town, which is a very clean little town. All the streets are bordered by shady trees. Some beautiful flower gardens adorn the central place. I am told that they represent repeated efforts to conquer dry desert, which does not take kindly to horticultural activity. A mulberry tree was planted by Sahibji Maharaj in 1915 when he began to build his colony, and it stands as a symbol of his appreciation of an artistic background. The industrial quarter's chief feature is a group of workshops which are called model industries. They are sensibly designed, light, airy, clean, and spacious. A Search in Secret India by Paul Brunton. Chapter 8. When Sahibji Maharaj is able to spare me a little time again from the pressure of his heavy duties, I pay my meed of tribute to his praiseworthy achievement and tell him of my astonishment at finding such a progressive town in unprogressive India. But, I ask, how do you finance it? You have surely spent a great sum of capital outlay. You will probably have an opportunity later of seeing the money come in, he returns. The members of the Raju Somi fraternity are themselves financing the colony. There is no compulsion on them to do this, nor are subscriptions required from them, but they regard it as a religious duty to give what they can to help Dialbag grow. But although we have had to depend on these contributions during the initial stages, my aim is to make it completely self-supporting. I shall not rest until we approach the stage of complete independence. You have wealthy supporters then? Not at all. The rich Raji Somis can be counted on the fingers of one hand. Our members are all in modest or moderate circumstances. The progress we have made has called for self-sacrifice on the part of many. Thanks to the grace of the Supreme Father, we have now been able to find and spend many lakhs, Lakhs, of rupees so far. The colony's future is assured, for its income will grow as our fraternity expands. Therefore, we shall never be out of funds. How many members have you? Our membership is over 110,000, but of course only a few thousand have settled here. The Raja Somi fraternity is nearly 70 years old, but its greatest growth has been made during the last 20 years. And this progress has occurred, mind you, without any public propaganda, because we are a semi-secret organization. If we care to come out into the public eye and propagate our teachings openly, we could increase our membership tenfold. Our members are spread all over India already, but they look to Dahalbagh as their headquarters and visit us as often as they can. They are organized into local groups which meet every Sunday at precisely the same hour, when we hold a special meeting at Dahalbagh. Sahabji pauses to wipe his spectacles. Just consider, when we began building this colony, we possessed no more than 5,000 rupees, which had been presented for the purpose. Our first plot of ground was no larger than 4 acres. Now it covers thousands of acres. Does it not seem that we are indeed growing? How large do you intend to make it? I expect to settle about 10 or 12,000 people here, and then we shall stop. A town of 12,000 people, if it is properly laid out, is large enough. I do not want to copy the monstrous towns of your Western countries. They are overcrowded and therefore breed many undesirable qualities. I want to build a garden city where people can work and live happily, where they can have plenty of space and air. It will take a few years more to finish its growth, and then it will be a model community. Incidentally, when I first read Plato's Republic, I was pleasantly surprised to find in that book many of the ideas I'm trying to express here. When it is complete, I want it to act as a prototype for the creation of similar communities all over India, or at least one in each province. I shall offer it as my solution of many problems. You want India to turn her energies into industrial development? Most certainly. That is her crying need, but I would not like to see India lose herself completely in it, as you in the West have done. He laughs back. Yes, India must build up industrial civilization to rid herself of the poverty which grinds the masses, but she must build it up on a system which will avoid the fight between capital and labor that would otherwise accompany it. How do you propose to do that? By aiming at personal well-being through general well-being and not at the expense of the community. We work on a cooperative principle, and everyone sets the success of it as being higher than personal success. There are pioneers working here for salaries much lower than they could obtain elsewhere. I refer to trained and educated men, not to illiterate laborers, of course, who do this voluntarily and gladly. This principle works well here only because we are inspired by a spiritual purpose, which is also the motive behind all other efforts. Some men who are in a position to do so are even giving their services freely. They will show you what a fine spirit and enthusiasm our people have. But when it is fully developed and completely self-supporting, I hope such sacrifices will be unnecessary. Anyway, it's the ideal of making spiritual progress more quickly which has brought these people here, for that is the fundamental aim of our fraternity. If you were to come here and join our colony, you might be worth 1,000 rupees a month, but you might have to take only 1/3 of that amount because we cannot afford to pay high salaries. Then gradually you might build a house, acquire a wife, and beget children. But if in this process you begin to think only of the material side of your career and lose sight of the spiritual ideal for which you really joined us, then to that extent you begin to fail. Despite all these material activities you see here, we try never to lose sight of the central purpose for which our fraternity was founded. I see. Now, we are not socialists in your Western sense, But it is a fact that in the industries, the farms, the colleges are all owned by the community. Moreover, the ownership extends to land and houses. You may build a house here, but it is only yours while you tenant it. Beyond these limits, everyone is free to possess and accumulate whatever money and property he has and wherever he has it. This, of course, completely divides us from the tyrannies of socialism. All our communal properties and all the money offerings voluntarily made by the members are regarded as trusts to be administered in a religious spirit. Everything is subordinated to our spiritual ideal. The administration is supervised by a body of 45 members, representative of the various provinces in India, which meet twice a year to scrutinize accounts and consider budgets. The ordinary work and general control is in the hands of executive committee of 11 members. You said before that you would offer dialogue as a solution of many problems. I do not see how you can offer it as a solution of the economic problem, which is perhaps the chief one today. Sahibji Maharaj smiles confidently. Even India may have something useful to contribute on that point, he rejoins. Let me tell you about a plan which we have lately put into operation in order to quicken our rate of growth during the next few years. This plan, to my mind, embodies economic and social principles of radical importance. We have established an inheritance fund, which invites offerings from those of our members who are able to subscribe 1,000 rupees and upwards. Every such subscriber then receives an annuity, not less than 5% of our administrative committee. At his death, the same annuity will be paid to his wife, child, or whoever else he has previously named. The second person has the right to name his or her successor to the annuity. But with the death of the third generation, all payment ceases. Should the original subscriber find himself in difficult circumstances or urgent need, then part or even all of his sum may be repaid to him. Thus, lakhs of rupees will, in the course of time, pour into the coffers of our committee through the inheritance fund, yet the purses of our members will not be laid under heavy toll. Whatever contribution they make will be sure of a moderate income in return. I take it that you are trying to find a clearer place between the evils of capitalism and the fancies of socialism. Anyway, I'm sure that you will deserve every bit of your success, and I hope it comes quickly. It becomes clear to me that Daihalbagh possesses assured resources for a successful future in the ever-growing inheritance fund, in the constant stream of voluntary donations, and in those industries which have reached a profit-making stage. Several well-known leaders in India are watching our experiment and waiting to see its results, says the white-turbaned head of the Raja Somis. Some have visited Daihalbagh, and even critics who oppose our ideas have come here. You see, the Indian people are among the weakest and poorest of the world, and its leaders offer conflicting panaceas. Gandhi came here once and engaged me in a long conversation. He wanted me to join his political campaign, but I refused. I have nothing to do with politics here. I believe in concentrating on the practical means of regeneration. Although I do not concern myself with Gandhi's political plans, I scout his economic ideas as being visionary and unpractical. He wants India to throw all machinery into the sea. Sahibji shakes his head. India cannot go back into the past. She must go forward and develop the best points of a material civilization if she is to become more prosperous. My countrymen had better take a lesson from America and Japan. The hand spinner and the hand weaver can no longer stand the onslaught of modern rationalized methods. And as Sahabji Maharaj expounds his ideas, I catch the picture of an alert American mind encased in a brown Hindu body. So efficient and businesslike is his manner, so precise is the expression of his thoughts. My rational temperament is attracted by his air of common sense, balance, and sanity, qualities not very common in this subcontinent. I realize anew the curious paradox which his character presents. Master of over 100,000 people who practice a mysterious form of yoga, prime organizer of the multifarious and materialistic activities which seethe around me and Dalhabag, taken all in all, I write him down as a brilliant and breathtaking man. Nowhere in India, nowhere in the entire world may I expect to meet his like again. His voice breaks into my thoughts. You have seen two aspects of our life here in Dalhabag, but our activities are threefold. Man's own nature is threefold: spirit, mind, and body. Therefore, we have the workshops and farms for physical work, the colleges for mental growth, and lastly, there are the group meetings for spiritual activities. Thus, we aim at harmonious and all-round growth for each individual. But we place greatest emphasis on the spiritual side, and every member of our fraternity endeavors to carry out his individual yoga practice regularly, wherever he may be. May I join in one of your group meetings? With pleasure. We shall welcome you at every gathering. A Search in Secret India by Paul Brunton. Chapter 13. Dialogue's activities begin at 6 o'clock in the morning with the first group meeting. Dawn swiftly rubs away the darkness of night. Sweet cherubs mingle with the funereal cries of the crows, and all the birds begin their matutinal homage to the sun. I follow my guide to a gigantic canvas structure, which is supported by wooden posts. A huge crowd of people presses around the entrance, where each person removes his sandals or shoes and hands them to waiting attendants. I follow the requirements of custom and then enter the great tented hall. A raised platform stands in the center, and His Holiness Sahabji Maharaj sits there on a chair. Hundreds of his followers squat in circling ranks around him, so that the entire floor is carpeted with human bodies. All eyes are turned upon the Master. All tongues are still in silent reverence. I make my way to a place beneath the platform and then squeeze myself into the narrow space. Soon, two men stand up at the rear of the hall, and their voices break out into a slow chant. The words are Hindu, and the rhythm is extremely agreeable to one's ears. This continues for some 15 minutes, by which time the strange sacred words have lulled one into a peaceful mood, and then the voices diminish in volume until they die down altogether. I look around. Every person in the tent is quiet, motionless, sunk in meditation or prayer. I look at the modest, plainly dressed figure on the platform, from whose lips no single word has yet come. His face is graver than usual. His alert, active manner has disappeared, and a serene contemplation seems to engage his mind. What thoughts cross and crisscross under his white turban, I wonder? What responsibility lies upon his shoulders, for all these people regard him as their sacred link with a higher life. The utter silence lasts for another half hour. Not a cough, not even a stir. Have all these contemplative Orientals withdrawn their minds into a world barred to the skeptical Westerner? Who knows? But it is a striking prelude to the forceful activities which will soon make the town hum. We recover our footgear and quietly disperse homeward. During the morning hours, I enter into conversation with many Radha Somists, both residents and visiting members. Several of them speak good English. There are turbaned men from the northwest, pig-tailed Tamils from the south, active little Bengalis from the east, and bearded figures from the central provinces. I am impressed by their air of self-respect and by the shrewd practicality which counterposes their spiritual aspirations. If their desires soar into the Empyrean, let me start the sentence again. If their desires soar into the Empyrean, their feet will still walk firmly on the solid earth. Here I reflect as a type of citizen of whom any town might be proud. I like them instinctively and admire them immensely, for they possess that rare quality, character. A smaller meeting takes place during the afternoon. It is a brief, informal affair intended for the benefit of visiting members. Individual problems are discussed, questions answered, and some matters of general concern are dealt with. Sahibji Maharaj reveals an uncommon resourcefulness in the way he disposes of everything which comes up. He adopts a chatty, witty tone, is never at a loss for an answer to the subtlest query, and delivers quick, confident opinions upon the most varied spiritual and material problems. His entire attitude betokens an unusual and successful reconciliation of complete self-confidence with quiet humility. He shows that he possesses an engaging sense of humor, which crops up again and again in merry remarks. The evening brings another group meeting. Every workshop, store, and farm in the colony has closed its activities for the day, and a vast gathering once more fills the giant tent. Sahibji Maharaj occupies his platform chair again. I watch a file of his followers approach his seat and voluntarily place contributions for the funds of the Board of Management at his feet. 2 committee members collect and record all these contributions. The chief event, which follows, is a lengthy address by the Master. His thousands of followers listen to the well-spoken Hindu with absorbed attention, for he has a good oratorial style. He seems to speak from the heart in a picturesque manner which is pregnant with deep feeling. He is so animated by the fiery vigor and ardent enthusiasm that the inspiring effect upon his hearers becomes almost palpable. A Search in Secret India by Paul Brunton, Chapter 13. Each day, the same unvarying program is followed. The evening meeting is the longest, for it lasts nearly 2 hours. It says much for the power of Sahibji Maharaj's mentality that he can keep up this program without difficulty and with his usual dynamic power. No one knows beforehand what the subject of his evening address will be. I question him upon the point, and he replies, "When I sit down in the chair, I am quite unaware of the subject. Even after I have begun, I do not know what my next sentence will be or how I will finish. I trust myself unreservedly to the Supreme Father. He tells me instantly whatever I need to know. I take my orders from him internally. I am actually in his hands. The words of his first address haunt me for some days. Its theme of surrendering to a master piques my mind until I broach it eventually to Sahibji. We sit on a carpeted piece of ground in the center of Dialbagh. It is something like a village green, and develop a friendly discussion. He reiterates his point and adds, "The master is absolutely necessary. There is no such thing as self-reliance in the spiritual sphere." "But did you find one necessary?" I ask boldly. "Without a doubt, I spent 14 years searching for a true master before I found him." 14 years? A fifth of your life? Was it worthwhile? The time I spent in search of a true master is never wasted. No, the time spent in search of a true master is never wasted, even if it is 20 years, he replies, quick as a flash. Before I became a believer, I was as skeptical as you are, and then I grew desperate in trying to discover a teacher who could open the way to spiritual illumination. I was young and simply crazy to find the truth. I asked the trees, the grass, and the sky to enlighten me if truth existed. I sobbed my heart out like a child, with head bent low, begging for light. Finally, I could stand the strain no longer. One day I resolved to give up eating and to starve to death, unless and until the divine power saw fit to grant me some illumination. I could no longer work even. The next night I had a vivid dream, wherein a master appeared to me and revealed himself as such. I asked for his address. His answer was Allahabad. You will know my full address later. The next day I spoke to a friend who belonged to that town, and I told him my dream. He went away and returned with a group photograph and asked me if I could identify the master's face in the group. I at once pointed to it. My friend then explained that he belonged to a semi-secret society in Allahabad, and that the figure I indicated was the master. I quickly got in touch with him and became a disciple. How interesting! Even if you take up yoga exercises alone and depend on your own powers, the day your true prayer is heard will be the day you will be led to meet a master. There is no escape. You must have a guide. A sincere, fully determined seeker will eventually be brought to his real master. How is one to recognize him? I murmur questioningly. Sahibji's face relaxes, and an amused expression flickers across his eyes for a moment. The master knows beforehand who is to come to him, and he will draw them magnetically to him. His power meets their destiny, and the result is inescapable. A little company of variegated figures has gathered around us and is rapidly increasing. Soon, Sahibji Maharaj will not have one hearer, but 2 or 3 score. I've been trying to form a clear understanding of your Rajasomi doctrines, I tell him, but they are hard nuts. One of your disciples has loaned me some writings on the subject by an earlier master of your fraternity, His Holiness Brahm Sankar Misra, with the result that my brain is working overtime. Sahibji laughs. If you want to understand the truths of Rajasomi teachings, you must perform our yoga practices. We regard the daily performance of these practices as being far more important than theoretical understanding of our doctrines. I'm sorry that I cannot explain the detailed method of meditation we employ because they are only imparted under the vow of secrecy to those who apply to join us and are accepted. But the basis of them is sound yoga, or listening for the internal sound, as we usually call it. The writings I am studying say that sound is the force which called the universe into being. From a material standpoint, you understand it correctly, but rather it is a current of sound that was the first activity of the Supreme Being at the beginning of creation. The universe is not the result of blind forces. Now, this divine sound is known to our fraternity and can be phonetically transcribed. It is our belief that sounds bear the impress of their source, of the power which created them. Therefore, when one of our members listens internally and expectantly for the divine sound with controlled body, mind, and will, he will become lifted up towards the bliss and wisdom of the Supreme Being as soon as he hears the divine sound. Is it not possible to imagine that the sound of the blood beating through one's arteries is the divine sound? What other sound can one hear internally? We do not mean any material sound, but a spiritual one. The force which appears as sound on our material plane is only a reflection of that subtler force whose workings evolved the universe. Just as your scientists have reduced matter to electricity, so we may trace the force which we hear on the material plane as sound to a higher vibration that escapes our physical ears because it exists on a spiritual plane. A sound carries the influence of the region whence it emanates, and so if you concentrate your attention inward in a certain way, you may one day hear the mystic words which sounded forth at the first upheaval in the primeval chaos, and which form the true name of the Creator. The echoes of those words reverberate back into man's spiritual nature. To catch those echoes by means of our secret yoga practice and to trace them up to their origin is literally to be carried up to paradise. The man who faithfully carries out our Raja Somi practices, which are intended to enable him to hear the mystic sound, will forget himself in utter ecstasy when at last it impinges itself upon his inner ear. Your teachings are startlingly novel. To the West, but not to India, Kabir taught the sound yoga in Benares as far back as the 15th century. One hardly knows what to say about them. Why the difficulty? You will readily admit that one form of sound, music, can throw a man into emotional ecstasy. Then how much more will the heavenly internal music affect him? Agreed. If one could prove that the internal music really does exist. Sahabji shrugs his shoulders. I might present you with several arguments to convince your reason, but I fancy you are looking for something more than that. How can I prove the existence of superphysical states by mere reasoning? It is natural for the unprepared mind to perceive nothing beyond this physical world. If you want the best proof, first-hand experience of these spiritual truths, then you must persistently follow up a course of yoga practices. I assure you that the human body is really capable of higher functions than those we commonly know, that the innermost parts of our brain centers are associated with subtle worlds of being, and that after proper training, these centers can be energized until we become aware of these subtler worlds, and that the most important center of all enables us to obtain divine consciousness of the highest order. Are you referring to the brain centers known to the anatomists? Anatomists? ANATOMISTS. Partly, they are merely the physical organs through which the subtler centers work. The real activity takes place in the latter. The most important of these centers is the pineal gland, which, as you know, is situated in the region between the eyebrows. It is the seat of spiritual entity in man. Shoot a man through that spot, and death is certain and instantaneous. The spirit currents which flow through the auditory, optic, olfactory, and other nerves converge in that gland. Our medical men are still puzzled about the chief functions of the pineal gland, I comment. And well, they might be, considering that it is the focus of the individual spirit entity which gives life and vitality to man's mind and body. It is when the spirit entity recedes from the pineal gland that the conditions of dream, deep sleep, or trance supervene, and when it finally leaves the gland, the body falls dead. Since the human body is an epitome, let me start the sentence again. Since the human body is an epitome of the entire universe, inasmuch as all elements employed in the evolution of creation are represented in it on a miniature scale, and since it contains links with all the subtler spheres, it is quite possible for the spirit entity in us to reach the highest spiritual world. When it leaves the pineal gland and passes upwards, its passage through the gray matter of the brain brings it into contact with the region of the universal mind, and its passage through the white matter exalts its consciousness to lofty spiritual realities. But to attain this spiritual consciousness, all the activities of the body's senses have to be brought to a standstill. Otherwise, it's not possible to shut off external stimuli. Therefore, the essence of our yoga practices is a complete concentration which turns the current of attention inwards, away from one's environment, until a profound degree of internal contemplation is attained. I look away, trying to digest this suavely spoken flow of subtle recondite ideas. A goodly-sized gathering around us is taking a keen interest in the talk. The tranquil assurance which underlies their master's words attracts me. But you say that the only way to verify these statements is to practice your sound yoga exercises. But you keep those exercises secret, I complain. Whoever applies for admission to our fraternity and is accepted will have our methods of spiritual practice communicated verbally to him. Can you not give me some personal experience first, some convincing proof at first hand? What you say may be perfectly true. Indeed, my heart wants to believe it. You must join us first. I'm sorry that I cannot do. I'm built in such a way that it is difficult to give belief before proof. Sahabji spreads out his hands in a helpless gesture. What can I do then? I am in the hands of the Supreme Father. A Search in Secret India by Paul Brunton. Day after day, I attend all the group meetings as regularly as the members of the society themselves. I meditate silently in their midst and listen to their masters' addresses. I question them freely and study such portions of the Radha Somi teachings concerning the universe and man as are made available to me. Late one afternoon, I wander with a disciple about 1 mile or so away from Dalabag to where the jungle begins. When we turn our feet towards Jumna and eventually sit down on the banks of that wide river, from the steep and sandy height, we watch the slow-moving water wind its placid way through the plain, which stretches to Agra. Now and then a great vulture flaps its way across our heads towards its home, the Jumna. Somewhere along these banks, Krishna moved victoriously among the milkmaids, charming them with his wondrous lute and his love-making. Today he is probably one of the most worshipped gods in the Hindu pantheon. Up till recent years, murmurs my companion, this place was the abode of wild animals, and at night they roamed over the very site on which Dalyabob has been built, and now they avoid the place. We sit silently for a couple of minutes, and then he says, "You are the first European to sit in our group meetings, though you will certainly not be the last. We appreciate the understanding and sympathy you have shown. Why don't you join our society?" Because I have no faith in faith, because I realize that it is fatally easy to believe in what you want to believe. He draws his knees up and rests his chin upon them. The contact that you are having with our master will benefit you in any case. I shall not press you to join. We do not attempt to make converts, and our members are not allowed to preach. How did you learn of the existence of this society? Very simply, my father had been a member for many years. He does not live at Dalyabob, but visits it from time to time. He brought me with him on one of those visits, but never on any occasion did he attempt to induce me to join. About 2 years ago, I began to puzzle over things and went about questioning various friends as to their beliefs. I questioned my father too, and what he told me drew me to the Raja Somi teachings. I was accepted as a member of the fraternity, and time has confirmed my faith. I was fortunate, perhaps, because others have come to us only after a lifetime spent in perplexity. If I could settle my doubts as easily and as quickly as you settle yours, I respond vacantly. Once again, we both revert to silence. The dark blue Jumna water draws my gaze, and I slip insensibly into a profound reverie. All the conscious and unconscious thinking of these Indians is colored by faith, by the necessity of owning allegiance to some sort of religion, creed, or sacred script. Every kind of faith, from the most degraded to the most dignified, is represented in India. Once I stumbled across a little temple on the Ganges. Its pillars were covered with carved reliefs depicting men and women engaged in sexual embrace, and its walls were frescoed with erotic scenes, which might horrify a Western clergyman. There is room for this kind of thing in Indian religion, and it may well be that the religious recognition of sex is a better thing than its relegation to the gutter. But then there is also room for faiths embodying the loftiest and purest conceptions possible to man, such as India. But nowadays, in this land, have I come across such an amazing cult as the Raja Somi. It is undeniably unique. What brain other than Sahabji Maharaj's could have conceived this paradoxical combination of yoga, the oldest learning in the world, with the high-pressure mechanized civilization of an up-to-date European or American city? Is Dalyabob likely to loom forth in Indian history out of all proportion to its present apparent unimportance? If India is a crossword puzzle to which no one seems to have yet found the correct solution, that is not to say that the Okay, let me start this again. Is Dalibag likely to loom forth in Indian history out of all proportion to its present apparent unimportance? If India is a crossword puzzle to which no one seems to have yet found the correct solution, that is not to say that the coming years shall not provide an answer. Sahabji had laughed at Gandhi's preaching of medievalism, and the town of Ahmedabad, where Gandhi's own headquarters lie, still echoes back this laughter. From the Sabarmati River, one can count 100 tall factory chimneys, which smoke defiance at the little cluster of white wooden bungalows where the gospel of peasant handicrafts finds its inspiration. The forceful impact of Western ways has begun to disintegrate India's traditional methods of carrying on the necessary business of living. The first Europeans who appeared off the sea coast of India brought not only bales of goods but also ideas. When Vasco da Gama landed his rough-bearded sailors in the quiet harbor of Calicut, there began that process of westernization which is moving at such a quick rate today. The industrialization of India has begun in a tentative and timid fashion, but it has begun. Europe has faced, in turn, the Renaissance of intellect, the religious Reformation, and the Industrial Revolution, and she has left these things behind. India has awakened and finds them lying in her stride. These are now her problems. Will she blindly imitate the Europeans, or will she work out her own and perhaps better way of solving them? Will Sahibji Maharaj's unique contribution focus her attention one day? If I am certain of anything, I am certain of this. India will be thrown into a melting pot of unparalleled character before long. Thousands of years of a society tied up in worn-out traditions, imprisoned in hidebound religious conventions, will vanish within 2 or 3 decades at most. It will seem a miracle, but it will happen. Sahibji Maharaj has evidently grasped this situation clearly enough. He realizes that we live in a new epoch. The old order of things is being destroyed everywhere, and in India, as in other countries. Are Asiatic lethargy and Western practicality to remain twin incompatibilities? He thinks not. Why should not the yogi put on the worldling's clothing? And so he gives forth the fiat that the yogi must come out of his habitual seclusion and mingle with the noisy assemblages where men command machines. He thinks it's time for the yogi to descend into the factory, the office, and the school and attempt to spiritualize them, not by preaching and propaganda, but by inspired action. The way of hustling everyday activity can and must be made the way of heaven. A spirituality-based way of living, like yoga, which stands too aloof from workaday men, may come to be regarded by them as a deceptive form of self-important stupidity. If yoga is to remain the hobby of a few hermits, the modern world will have no use for it, and the last traces of the dying science will disappear from existence. If it is to serve only as the dilection of some lean anchorites who push pens or plows, move amidst the grease and the grime of engine rooms, who have to endure the hubbub of stock exchanges and the busy barter of shops, we shall roughly turn our heads away. The attitude of the modern West will shortly be the attitude of modern India. Sahibji Maharaj has shrewdly foreseen the inevitable trend of things and has made a striking effort to save the ancient science of yoga for modern use. This inspiring and strenuous man will certainly leave his mark on his native land. He has realized that his country has lain in lethargy long enough. He sees clearly why the West, throbbing with manufacture and trade and its agriculture modernized, lives a wealthier life. He sees also that the culture of yoga remains one of the valuable inheritance which India has received from her ancient sages, but that the few masters who keep this culture alive in lonely places are a fading remnant of their class. When they die, the real secrets of yoga will die with them. And so he has come down from the rarefied air of those peaks of thoughts to our times, to the energetic strivings of the 20th century, and is endeavoring to relate the two. Is his effort too fantastic? On the contrary, it is highly admirable. We live in days when Muhammad's tomb in Arabia is illumined by electric light, when the camel is being pushed off the desert sands of Morocco by luxurious fitted motor cars. What then of India? This vast country, startled from the sleep of many hundreds of years by the impact of a completely opposite culture, must go on opening its heavy-lidded eyes. The English have done more than turn sandy deserts into fertile fields, than build canals and dams to assist agriculture and regulate the floods of the great rivers, than fling the impenetrable barrier of highly efficient soldiers across the northwest frontier to keep peace and property secure, then bring a healthy breeze of sane, rational ideas. Out of the gray north and distant west came the white men. Fate placed India at their feet, and the country became theirs, but with a few efforts. Why? Perhaps the world, incubating over Asiatic wisdom and Western science, will one day hatch out a civilization that will shame antiquity, deride modernity, and amaze posterity. The trail of my meditation comes to an end. I raise my head and answer a questioning word. And address a questioning word to my companion. I do not think he hears me. He continues to stare across the river, which reflects the last red light of sunset. It is the twilight hour. I watch the great orb make its rapid disappearance from the sky. The stillness is indescribable. All nature, dumb at the lovely sight, seems to have come to a momentary rest. My heart drinks in the superb peace. Once more, I glance at the other man. His figure is now wrapped in the shroud of fast-gathering dusk. So we sit in the dead silence for a few more minutes until the sun slips silently into the black night. My companion rises and quietly leads me through the shadows back to Daliabab. Our walk terminates under a canopy of thousands of starry points of light. A Search in Secret India by Paul Brunton. Sahibji Maharaj decides to leave Dalibag and go down to a place in the central provinces for a well-earned rest. I take the event as our destined time of farewell and plan a move in the same direction. We shall travel together as far as Tamarni, and then our ways will diverge. About an hour after midnight, we descend on Agra station. A score of close disciples accompany their master, so the size of our party is quite noticeable. Someone procures a chair for Sahibji, and while he sits in the midst of his devoted followers, I pace the half-lit platform. During the day, I have reviewed my stay, and I realize with regret that no memorable inner experience has occurred. No soul-heaving vision of life's secret meaning has been vouchsafed to me. I had hoped that some illuminating yogic expansion of consciousness might pierce my mental gloom for an hour or two, so that I could then follow up the track of yoga with sight and not with faith. But no, the benediction is not for me. Perhaps I am not worthy of it. Maybe I demand far too much. I do not know. From time to time, I glance at the seated figure. Sahibji Maharaj possesses a magnetic personality which fascinates me. He is a curious mixture of American alertness and practicality, British predilection for correct conduct, and Indian devoutness and contemplativeness. He is a type which is rare in the modern world. Over 100,000 men and women have entrusted the guidance of their inner lives to this man, yet he sits there in quiet modesty and humility, this unassuming master of the Radha Somas. At last our train roars into the station, and a giant headlight throws an uncanny illumination upon the scene through which the rails pass. Sahibji enters his reserved compartment, and the rest of us sort ourselves into the other carriages. I stretch myself out for a few hours' sleep, and I know nothing more until I awake in the morning with an incredibly dry throat. At every halt which the train makes during the next few hours, followers of Sahibji who live in the vicinity or even many miles away crowd around his compartment window. They have been notified of his journey in advance and eagerly seize the opportunity of obtaining this brief contact. For it is said in India that even a minute's contact with the Master will produce important spiritual and material results. I seek and obtain Sahibji's permission to spend my last 3 hours with him in his own compartment. We fall into a long talk about world conditions and about the nations of the West, about India's future, and about the future of his own cult. At the end, he tells me, in his pleasant, suave manner, "Let me assure you that I have no consciousness of India being my own country. I am cosmopolitan in outlook and look on all men as my brothers." Such amazing frankness delights me. It is so with all his conversations. He always goes straight to the point. He shoots every sentence at a definite target, and he has the full courage of his convictions. To converse with him, to commune with his mind, is a welcome experience. Always he comes out with some unexpected phrase, some new viewpoint on things. The train now moves slowly across the country at an angle which brings an intolerable sun through the window and into my eyes. The torrid heat bakes one's flesh. The merciless rays weary one's mind. I pull up the wooden sun blind, that peculiar structure which is so curiously like a Venetian blind, and switch on the electric fan, thus gaining a slight relief from the midday heat. Sahibji Maharaj notices my discomfort and draws some oranges out of a traveling bag. He puts them on a small table, and he asks me to share them with him. "They will cool your throat," he observes. As his knife slowly parts the colored peel, he remarks musingly, "You are right in being so careful about taking anyone as your master. Skepticism is a useful attitude before you decide on him, but afterwards you must have full faith. Don't rest until you find your spiritual preceptor. He is absolutely essential." Before long, there is a grinding sound, and someone noisily shouts, "Tamarni!" Sahibji Maharaj rises to depart. something awakens in me before his disciples can come and capture him. It breaks my reserve, ignores my Western pride, crushes my anti-religious temperament, and speaks through my lips. Your Holiness, may I have your blessing. He turns with a friendly smile, beams pleasantly through his glasses, and cordially pats my shoulder. You have that already, he assures me in farewell. I return to my compartment, and the train moves rapidly away. Dun-colored fields flash by the window. Little groups of drowsy-eyed cattle munch contentedly on the sparse herbage. My eyes register them only half-consciously, for my mind is carrying away a picture of a notable man whom I greatly like and profoundly admire, for he is at once an inspired dreamer, a serenely minded yogi, a practical man of the world, and a polished gentleman.